Welcome to another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors. I'm your host, Dr. Barbara Hales. Today, we have with us Dr. Jimmy Moley. He is a board-certified adult and sports psychiatrist based in Independence, Ohio. He completed his undergraduate training at the University of Notre Dame, medical school and adult psychiatry residency at The Ohio State University, and certificate in sports psychiatry through the International Society for Sports Psychiatry. He now owns and operates a solo private practice and is licensed in Ohio and Florida. His interests include the mental health care of athletes, impact and treatment of head injuries, and the use of psychotherapy to improve athletic performance. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Where in Florida do you come and practice?
So my physical practice is located up near the Cleveland area. So all of my work in Florida is done via telehealth.
Oh, okay. Do you ever come down to Florida?
I have, yeah. I would like to visit, actually vacation there a lot as a family growing up. So always like to make it down. And a lot of people, vacationing or living part-time, at least in Florida from the Cleveland area. So kind of makes sense, I think, to have both on board.
Well, okay. Well, welcome to Florida as well as the show. What were the biggest challenges you faced when starting out, and how did you overcome them?
Sure. So I did my medical school and residency, as you mentioned, at Ohio State. So coming to Cleveland, it was a new area. I was pretty, relatively unfamiliar with the local resources and starting up as a solo, practitioner in the area. So I think a lot of challenges related to networking and trying to find my place right in the city as a new private practice doctor. So I think one of the biggest things I did early on was schedule a ton of meetings and try to reach out to as many professionals as I could. So this meant, other psychiatrists in the area to try to get their perspective and advice. This meant primary care doctors and, people from all other kind of medical specialties and even, non-medical professionals to try to find out the best way to kind of integrate myself into the culture, into the city, and try to understand, what was going on. So that was probably number one. I also was able to connect with a trustworthy lawyer and accountant who helped me navigate a lot of the challenges with starting a business, right? Because going through medical school and residency, at least from my perspective, there wasn't a whole lot of training on how to get those things started. And then, it kind of in terms of the day-to-day, practice, forms, intake, all those sorts of things, I was able to identify a few trusted mentors who were doing something similar in Columbus, actually, where I was previously, and was really able to rely on them for a lot of advice, really, trusted guidance there. So, one of the biggest things I always try to share is that, I feel like I try to do a good job of understanding what I don't know and trying to identify experts in the field who do and relying on their expertise to help guide me.
That's good. Was there a turning point or a pivotal moment that helped you transition from startup to success? And how did you seize that opportunity?
Yeah, so, I think, in starting a private practice, I wanted to be very intentional with how I built the practice and choosing, the right kind of patient, the right kind of environment and practice there. So that I think by nature was going to be a relatively slow process. And in terms of income, I was looking around at different kind of part-time opportunities and things to kind of help supplement me, which would allow me to have that patience to grow the practice. So I was able to find work doing, kind of veteran evaluations for disability benefits. So I'd say that was a pretty helpful turning point because that allowed me to really kind of take my time, build the practice the way I really wanted to build it, and have a pretty hands-on approach where I didn't feel rushed that I needed, X amount of referrals per week or anything like that. So I mean, I think, for psychiatrists and I think probably physicians in general, the number of kind of part-time, maybe out of the box type employment opportunities do exist and would be especially helpful for someone looking into private practice.
Mhm. And are you still in private practice now?
I am, yeah. So just finished up my seventh month in practice and things are going really well. So it's been a great experience.
What are the top strategies you've used to market yourself effectively in your field? And how do you think these can be adapted for other healthcare professionals in private practice?
So I'd say a few different strategies. The most effective has probably been personal one-on-one networking meetings that I kind of alluded to briefly earlier. So primary, private, practice care docs, different, especially like in psychiatry, I deal with a lot of therapists, right? So both referrals in and referrals out. So meeting one-on-one with a lot of therapists and just other professionals in the area. So one-on-one meetings is probably the number one thing. They get to see you in person. They know what you're like, your personality, which I would imagine makes it easier, right, to refer someone who you've met personally. So
Of
that's
course.
number one. Um, I was able to join the local chamber of commerce, as well as attend, meetings of other local chambers in the area, and that's been actually extremely effective. I think to meet, like-minded professionals, and I think the biggest thing a lot of times is private practice making people aware that you're in the area and what kind of services you provide, right? So the chambers have done a nice job, and then the third is probably social media. So um, I started, obviously my website, Instagram account, and being pretty active there and posting regularly, but also reaching out to like-minded professionals both in the area and around the country to learn from and connect with them has been, I think, especially helpful for marketing.
What role has personally branding played in your success? And what advice would you give to doctors looking to establish their personal brand?
I think it's especially important in private practice. So, I find that a lot of patients who come to me are maybe dissuaded a little bit by the big hospital systems, right? That there's some reason that they're looking for a private practice physician, and a lot of times I think it's that lack of personal kind of touch and lack of personal connection that you have. So a lot of times patients refer to, the long wait times to see a psychiatrist, the short follow-up times, and that sort of thing. So I say that because I think personal branding is important because they have to be able to connect with you on a certain level, right? They have to learn to trust you. And I think especially in mental health, right, that trust is especially important. So I'd say that, kind of my personal branding, I think, is kind of the key to establishing meaningful relationships with patients, in showing the value of my work as a private practice physician. I think the onus, unlike in a hospital system, you might rely on the reputation of the clinic, the name, that kind of thing. But in my practice, right, my reputation is my work. So being able to put that brand out there and build that trust is, I think, is one of the most important things that I think about.
So, would you say that that is what was able to connect you with your ideal audience? And what lessons can private practitioners learn from your approach? I mean,
I think
presumably everybody like wants to present themselves as being authentic and honest.
Sure, sure. And I think that's probably where it starts. But then I also think too in private practice and in terms of targeting an audience, right? Having some level of specificity helps. So my background and training in sports psychiatry, I think opens the door for different kinds of people and different groups who may not have been interested before, but now all of a sudden have come to that table, right? So I can go to gyms in the area or personal trainers or people involved in the kind of the greater sports world and universe and have that credibility, right, from a mental health standpoint. So I'd say, how that applies more broadly is maybe in terms of private practice, trying to find some more specific niche that gets you in the door with maybe people that might not traditionally be thought of as having that kind of connection, but really opening that door based on your specificity and your level of training.
I see. And have you approached personal trainers and gyms in your area?
I have, yeah. So I've had a number of good connections. I've tended to find that people, in that kind of personal training fitness world are highly motivated, are highly invested in their well-being, and that lends itself well, right, to engagement with healthcare and especially psychiatry. So, I've been able to have some great relationships working on kind of formalizing some of those in terms of, maybe I spend part of my week, actually in the gym and with an office there to meet people where they are. So, um, I think it's really exciting, right? It allows you to meet different kinds of people, allows you to provide care in maybe a little bit more unconventional areas and maybe open some people more up to mental health care and psychiatry in general.
It makes you more buff at the same time.
There you go. Always a good thing, right?
If a doctor wanted to improve their marketing today, what is one quick and impactful strategy they can implement immediately?
hmm So social media, right, it is there for everyone, but I also realize like that can be challenging and I think kind of overwhelming for some folks, especially starting off. So I would recommend probably starting small. I focused on kind of one platform in Instagram that I thought was perhaps the most impactful. But that may vary, as we go along in time and by location and that sort of thing. So I would say social media is pretty accessible for everybody. But I still go back to my most important marketing strategy has been those in-person one-on-one meetings with
Hmm.
people in the area. So again, I think from a trust standpoint, from an in-person standpoint, and from an authenticity standpoint, that's been far and away the way I've gotten the most referrals and made the most connections in the area.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for people to realize that, they may think that it's like old school, but networking and personal one-to-one connections is always going to be there.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think on the other side, I've seen how people appreciate it, right? I think it's a little bit refreshing to meet somebody face to face and to really take that time. And if you invest that time up front and it turns into, right, a few referrals, then I think that, is all the more worth it then.
Yeah. Have you been able to refer back to them as well, other people that you have been seeing as patients?
Absolutely. I think it helps me to kind of have that network too, right? I can talk to a patient and say, "Hey, I know sounds like you're really struggling with your, dietary kind of plan and everything like that. Well, hey, I know a really good nutritionist, right? That could kind of help guide you through that. And in turn, that's going to help their mental health outcomes. That's going to help them, kind of on all levels. And I think I do a good job, I hope to, or at least try to, of understanding, right, where my limitations and my knowledge stops, right? So I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have as much knowledge as a nutritionist in that area, but that's why I make those connections so that I through my network and really makes that service valuable to patients that hey, you have access to my full network.
What is a common mistake that professionals make when trying to market themselves, and how can doctors avoid it in their practice?
It's a good question. I think what I've seen a lot is doctors advertising more of the medical services and really putting an emphasis on that. And what I've found is patients really place a high value in the private practice world on who you are as a person, on your level of care, and on a lot of the things that are maybe not related to the actual practice of medicine, right? So at this point, I mean, in my world, like you can provide, medication for depression, anxiety, and ultimately that's not a whole lot different than what somebody could get through, say, a big hospital system. But I think that what sets you apart and what the differences are is the level of service, is the personal attention, is the, focus on holistic care and treating the other person as an actual person, right? I found that that's why most people come to me. So I think, instead of maybe advertising kind of other things, I think really trying to focus on, hey, this is what I can provide you, and advertising, what about me is unique and what sets me apart in a way that you're going to be willing to make this investment to come see me.
Yeah, well, as an individual, I know that you can't always be available for somebody that wants to speak to you like now, because like you are human and you have other responsibilities and other desires, and you do also want to have a work-life balance. Like when I came to Florida, although I think it's this way everywhere in the country now, I really was literally shocked when I heard a recording on a doctor's um, voicemail, which was not just one, it just seemed to be everyone that said, if it's an emergency, hang up, go to the hospital or call 911. If it's not an emergency, the doctor will get back to you within 48 to 72 hours. And the first time I heard that, it was like, what? What?
Yeah.
I mean, like when I had my private practice, if they didn't hear from me in like 15, 20 minutes, they would like go ballistic. So I would think that there is like an added danger of a psychiatric patient not being able to like reach you right away. Um, do you have some um protection or some strategies to um, get somebody to speak to them until you can reach them?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good question, right? Because emergencies, especially in psychiatric care, can come up relatively frequently and a lot of times have, life or death type stakes, right? So my official kind of policy is that I respond within 24 hours to all messages now. Realistically, like you said, that's probably closer to 10, 15 minutes, depending on where I am. But there's times, like you said, you're in an appointment or things like that. So um, I think while I'm actively working, I try to get back to patients within an hour or two. Um, I do kind of the target is a smaller practice, so it allows me that flexibility and time to really provide that personalized level of care. But I think you also realistically have to make connections, with other like psychiatrists or call service or something as well to have some sort of backup system. So I've done that. I have a few providers in the area who we kind of share a network with. and are able to cover for each other. So I think, kind of having multiple layers, and always obviously having 911 as a backdrop, but um, providing that personalized level of care that's there all the time is obviously critically important, right?
In addition to the fact that that's why they're coming to you, is
Right,
because
right.
they do want more of you rather than just somebody unknown walking through the door.
Right. Right. One thing actually too, on that note, what I do is as part of my practice, I keep two slots open at the end of every day for like same day or urgent type appointments. So I feel like that's important. I know it may up front kind of seem like sacrificing maybe some time or income there, but I really feel like that's made a huge difference. Those slots fill up kind of more than maybe I even initially expected. And I think like it's just so helpful for patients to know that that's there, even if they don't use it, right?
I think that that's great advice, and I think listeners, if you can just add a slot, that might ease tensions in your practice in your office. Um, is there any last helpful hint or advice that you'd like to give the listeners out there?
I think I've kind of gone through different stages, right, of feeling nervous, anxious, also excited always at the same time. And what I felt is that what I've noticed is that um, you really kind of are playing the long game in setting up a private practice, right? That there's been, stretches I've gone, and I may have 10 referrals in a week, right? There also may be a stretch of 2 weeks where I get one referral. I'm not, maybe, other more experienced practitioners can speak to, but I really haven't been able to discern a pattern in terms of when to expect referrals or business to come through the door. So I think patience is just obviously super important. Patience and intentionality when building the practice. So the goal here is to do it slowly, to do it the way I feel comfortable, and to be okay with kind of the level that things come in. So having maybe other sources of income or things like that allow me to do that, and I think have been one of the main reasons I've been able to be successful.
I think that's great advice. Thank you for being on the show today. I'm sure that the listeners have gotten a good idea of not only you, but how it then can help them. This has been another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors with your host, Dr. Barbara Hales. Till next time.